WWE Hall of Famer Paul Heyman has been an integral part of Roman Reigns' faction. The Wiseman recently claimed that he was doing bloodline business several years before the fearsome stable came into existence on television. Since the formation of the bloodline, Heyman has been serving as their special counsel and the Wiseman. Amid Reigns' absence from television, the 58-year-old is still standing beside Solo Sikoa after the latter established himself as the new leader of the heel stable. Paul Heyman recently took to his Instagram stories to upload a throwback video from his days in WCW where he used to manage the Samoan SWAT team, which included real-life bloodline members Rikishi and Samu. The legendary manager wrote that he had been doing bloodline business for 35 years, which was way before Roman Reigns' faction came into existence. WWE personality believes Solo Sikoa might kick out Paul Heyman before Roman Reigns' return on a recent edition of the Not Sam Wrestling podcast. WWE personality Sam Roberts said that he believed Solo Sikoa might throw out Paul Heyman from the bloodline before Roman Reigns' impending return to television. Look, it's not impossible, but Haku cannot do Paul Heyman promos. Like, Paul Heyman is there to do Paul Heyman promos. I mean, eventually, he might get thrown out right before Roman comes back, but Haku and Paul Heyman would serve two very different roles. Is Solo gonna do all the talking for the bloodline? I don't know. He went from doing none of the talking to doing all of the talking. That's my only problem, he said. Many fans believe Reigns might turn face after his return to WWE television and possibly form a new bloodline to feud with Solo Sikoa. It will be interesting to see what the Stamford-based promotion has planned for the Tribal Chief's impending return. In the annals of sports entertainment, few figures loom as large as Paul Heyman. His wit, his charisma, and his knack for steering the careers of some of the industry's biggest stars have earned him a place in wrestling history. Yet, amidst the tales of his alliances with legends like Brock Lesnar and CM Punk, there lies a narrative that has remained largely untold, the story of Heyman's clandestine dealings in the shadows of the wrestling world, long before the rise of Roman Reigns and his formidable faction, the Bloodline. To truly understand Heyman's connection to the concept of the Bloodline, one must delve deep into the annals of wrestling lore, back to a time when the landscape of the industry was vastly different. It was during the late 1990s, amidst the chaos of the Monday Night Wars, that Heyman first began to sow the seeds of what would eventually become the Bloodline. In those tumultuous days, Heyman was a master manipulator, a puppeteer pulling the strings of fate with a cunning that few could match. As the mastermind behind Extreme Championship Wrestling, ECW, he cultivated a roster of misfits and rebels, transforming them into household names through sheer force of will. It was within the crucible of ECW that Heyman first began to toy with the idea of a family, a faction bound not by blood, but by a shared vision of dominance. The early incarnations of Heyman's vision were rough around the edges, mere whispers in the wind amidst the cacophony of the Attitude Era. Names like Taz, the Dudley Boys, and Raven formed the foundation of what would become known as Heyman's Dangerous Alliance, a collection of outcasts united in their quest to tear down the establishment. Though they achieved success in their own right, it was clear that Heyman's grand design had yet to fully take shape. As the new millennium dawned and the landscape of professional wrestling continued to shift, Heyman found himself at a crossroads. ECW, once the rebellious upstart challenging the status quo, now found itself struggling to keep pace with the financial juggernauts of WWE and WCW. It was in this moment of uncertainty that Heyman's genius truly began to shine. In a move that shocked the wrestling world, Heyman aligned himself with his former adversaries, Vince McMahon and WWE. Overnight, the renegade promoter became an integral part of the very establishment he had once sought to overthrow. Yet, even as he basked in the spoils of his newfound success, Heyman remained true to his vision, biding his time and waiting for the perfect moment to strike. It was during this period of transition that Heyman first crossed paths with Roman Reigns, then a young up-and-comer still finding his footing in the world of professional wrestling. Though their initial interactions were brief, Heyman saw in Reigns a spark of potential, a glimmer of greatness waiting to be unleashed upon the world. Little did either man know that their fates would become inexorably intertwined in the years to come. As Reigns rose through the ranks of WWE, Heyman watched from the sidelines, his interest piqued by the young superstar's meteoric ascent. It was not long before Heyman saw in Reigns the perfect vessel for his long-dormant vision of the bloodline, a vision that had been simmering in the back of his mind for over a decade. With Heyman's guidance, Reigns began to embrace his destiny, forging alliances and conquering adversaries with a ruthless efficiency that sent shockwaves through the wrestling world. Yet, even as Reigns reveled in his newfound dominance, Heyman remained ever vigilant, knowing that their journey was far from over. In the shadows of the wrestling world, Heyman continued to pull the strings of fate, orchestrating behind-the-scenes machinations with a deftness that bordered on the supernatural. Through alliances forged in blood and betrayal, Heyman laid the groundwork for the emergence of the Bloodline, a faction unlike any the world had ever seen. When the Bloodline finally made its presence known to the world, it was not as a mere faction, but as a force of nature, an unstoppable juggernaut hell-bent on reclaiming its rightful place at the top of the wrestling world. Led by Reigns and bolstered by Heyman's cunning, the Bloodline swept through WWE like a hurricane, leaving a trail of destruction in its wake. Yet, even as the world marveled at the spectacle unfolding before them, few knew the true extent of Heyman's involvement in the creation of the Bloodline. To the outside world, he was merely a mouthpiece.